Today, we're diving into a sermon that uses a really dramatic biblical scene to explore a huge question. When everything is on the line, where do you place your ultimate trust for security? As it turns out, the answer is rarely what we think it is.
And that brings us right to the heart of it. The sermon really wants us to ask ourselves, what are we truly trusting in? Most of us probably have a standard answer ready to go. But the argument here is that our true allegiance, what we're really leaning on, only shows itself when the pressure is on.
So the sermon first looks at one of the most common answers of all, ourselves. Trusting our own strength, our willpower, our promises. And to show why that might be a shaky foundation, it zooms in on one of the most famous failures in the Bible, the story of the disciple Peter. Listen to this. Just hours before everything goes down, Peter makes this incredibly sincere and bold declaration. The sermon makes a great point here. Peter is chosen as the example precisely because he was the strongest, the most outspoken, the leader. If anyone could stand firm, you'd think it would be him. And yet, when he's actually confronted, this is his response. A complete reversal. It's this shocking contrast that the sermon uses to make its point. Even the most passionate human will can completely crumble under a true test. The self, it argues, is just not enough. And here's where it gets really fascinating, right down to the very words they use. In the exact same story, when soldiers come for Jesus, he declares, "I am," a statement of divine power so strong, the text says it knocks them to the ground. Peter's response, "I am not," is framed as its perfect, tragic opposite, a declaration of human failure. So the crucial takeaway here is pretty clear, right? The sermon is essentially saying, look, if Peter, the guy nicknamed the Rock, could crumble under pressure, then what chance does anybody else have? The conclusion is that no one can truly depend on their own inner strength for their ultimate security. Self-reliance is presented as a path to failure. Okay, so if self-reliance isn't enough, what about religion itself? The sermon then explores this second path, trusting in systems, in rules, in group identity. And for this, it turns to the religious leaders who were orchestrating Jesus' execution. And this is just a wild illustration of the sermon's point about hypocrisy. Get this. The leaders are meticulously observing a minor ceremonial rule, not wanting to be defiled before a religious festival, while at the exact same time, they're actively trying to get an innocent man murdered. It's a shocking disconnect between how things look on the outside and what's really happening on the inside. The speaker uses this really modern term, image management, to diagnose their behavior. And it fits perfectly, doesn't it? Their focus wasn't on justice or truth, but on maintaining the appearance of righteousness. They were way more concerned with following the letter of the law than its spirit, which the sermon warns is a dangerously easy trap to fall into. So, the bottom line of this section is that just being part of a religious system, a church, or any organization is not sufficient. In fact, it can create a false sense of security, one that allows major moral failures to hide behind minor acts of observance. All right, so if self-reliance fails and religious systems are inadequate, what's left? Well, this brings us to the third and final part of the sermon, where it presents its one and only proposed solution, the sufficiency of Jesus Christ. The sermon points to Jesus' own words spoken long before his arrest. He predicted not just that he would die, but how he would die, by being lifted up, which was a direct reference to crucifixion. This is presented as powerful evidence of a deliberate, sovereign plan at work. This slide lays out the chain of events just as the sermon sees it. Each step, from the legal rules binding the Jewish leaders to the specific execution methods of the Romans, isn't treated as a coincidence. Instead, it's all portrayed as the careful unfolding of a divine plan working through the actions of unknowing people to fulfill a very specific prophecy. So this brings the sermon's whole argument to a really clear conclusion. It presents three distinct paths. You have the path of the self, embodied by Peter, which leads to failure. You have the path of religious law, followed by the leaders, which leads to hypocrisy. And that leaves the path of Christ, which is presented as the only one that is truly sufficient. And so we end right back where we began. After deconstructing these different options, the sermon leaves us with its original challenge. It's a question not just about belief, but about your foundation. What or who are you truly depending on for your ultimate security?